Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. Stephen Quayle joins us as we talk about alien artifacts. Go to our website when you get a moment and look at the first button in our revolving carousel. Some of the pictures that Steve has already sent us, amazing. He's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Stephen Quayle back with us, writer, researcher, over a dozen books dealing with advances of ancient technology and civilizations. His documentary film production company, Gen 6 Productions, films the true legends, the series, all over the planet in search of the lost cities and the giants of history who were the apparent builders of the really great megalithic structures of the ancient world. Take a look at some of the pictures he sent us. We've got it in our highlight reel at coasttocoastam.com. Ancient artifacts could be alien. You never know. Stephen, welcome back.
Well, thank you, George. And again, it's interesting listening to your previous guest talking about all of the activity that's going on in the skies above and the oceans below and even beneath the earth are pointing to the fact that there's very, very little time left for the government to continue to pretty much dominate the false narrative of the copy, if you will, the putting forth of such a ridiculous report on the UAP undertaking they did to Congress. Some of the images that we sent to you from the expedition in Mexico, the second one, are just astonishing because they have human DNA, they have alien DNA representation, and more importantly, these are found in the 9-foot level that were located by ground-penetrating radar, georadar, all forms of ground scanning, and we got the whole thing on film establishing the authenticity, the provenance, and in order to make sure that there was no hanky-panky, it was segregating of this. It was a segregation of the diggers from the locators, and so in essence, we flagged everything. We took everything. This was about a week-long expedition, just the actual dig part, and it was hand-dug to the 9-foot level, being very careful. And one of the first images you have on your carousel is a literal alien creature in a flying saucer with alien glyphs, meaning alien language symbols. And I think, as I've told you, my company's been doing a 3-year ongoing process to decipher the glyphs, and there's only 500,000 of them, so it's a small undertaking. But we've got some very bright minds around the world working on it. So I'm excited to be on tonight because, again, I think the idea that the government is ever going to tell the truth until they're forced to is a misnomer. And I also heard your guest talking about Uma. Maybe I'm mispronouncing that, but the extrasolar asteroid. Why this is so critical to me, I believe that was, as a Harvard astrophysicist, that was a controlled ship, a craft.
Yep.
When we were in Mexico, George, Jesse G., my head of antiquities down in Mexico, by the way, we only use Mexican crews because, again, there's no external infusion of, anybody trying to get anything, put anything over. But we were taken. I'm not saying I wasn't there. Obviously, I'm a gringo, and that would not work through the highlands of some of the areas in Mexico. But Jesse was taken to a craft that looked like, in essence, an oblong asteroid, okay, from the outside. But the interesting thing about it was suspended in the air, kind of very much like the Independence Day movie, where obviously the aircraft in Area 51, spacecraft, flying saucer, was suspended. So it was in an electrogravitic position, and the people that wanted to sell this craft wanted $1 million hard money, cash in a suitcase or in an attaché case. but he was blindfolded. He traveled for 2 hours. They made him put our camera systems and also our cell phones, everything, and they wouldn't allow pictures taken until the tribute money or ransom money was paid. Well, I couldn't put it together that fast, seeking people that would be interested. And so the three-letter people, and I'll just let people use their imagination, showed up because they have been tracking Jesse on every one of our expeditions. And it's like a James Bond movie playing out, because it takes away all the artifacts we have, prove that all of this fanfare that's gone on in Washington is nothing more than a three-ring circus. In my opinion, 1,500 pages, there's 2 million files of all of the alien-related documents between all the 3- and 4-letter agencies. So, this is a big find. It's a big deal. So, in essence, when people go to Coast to Coast, your main page, your front page, they'll see all the different artifacts that have been found.
I've got to ask you about picture number 4 before we roll into this, Stephen, the pyramid. But clearly you can see extraterrestrials on the pyramid shape.
Yes, you can. And
remarkable.
It's mind-blowing because, again, there's a backstory to this that's really fascinating. I sent it to you, and I said, take a look at this, because in 1944, there was a German by the name of Jarlsrud. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but over the years that he was in this general vicinity of Tula, Mexico, he collected over 33,500 artifacts over the period of a decade. And what's interesting is he was an amateur archaeologist, and they looked a lot like the ones our team have uncovered. By the way, there are Mexican nationals turning over this stuff. There's too many to be fakes or to have been, what would you say, recreations or anything. I mean, these are over a 500 square mile area. But what's interesting is that even then, in 1944, that the University of Pennsylvania did radiocarbon dating and additional tests on some of the pottery, and they determined it was between 4,500 BC and 6,500 years ago. Well, some of them even tested, I'm talking the artifacts, 9,000 years. So what most people need to understand is all of the labs that are of sophistication are hooked in to the intelligence agencies. So they have a standard policy when something exceeds their, how should we say, acceptable tolerance zone. Anything that's an out-of-place artifact, the CIA or any other of the agencies are notified. So, by the way, all these artifacts are in Mexico. If they were brought into the United States, they'd be seized. So that's where they are, and we show, again, on the carousel, the aerial shots of the GPR, ground-penetrating radar, the georadar, and these are in some of the most, I'm just going to say this, remote areas, and some of them are on the city limits. So we're showing people that the entire narrative coming out of Washington, oh, gee, where do all these things come from? It's all a dog and pony show, and it's totally fake. There is no way to challenge our results, okay, at this point, because they can say, well, you guys put them there, you guys did this, that. They can't even interpret some of the signals, I'm sorry, not the signals, but the sigils that are on these plates, like, for instance, the alien glyph story panel, which is down, right center, number 5 image, and even the no such NSA and CIA, I mean, they don't have the complete document of all of the different alien glyphs, all the symbols. For instance, the most standard alien glyph symbol worldwide that goes back literally 9,000 plus years is the spiral, which is a symbol for the Stargate.
Right.
And when the late, Cliff Mahooty passed away, but when we were interviewing him for the film we did on Holocaust of Giants, he was explaining how many Stargates were in the desert Southwest and delineated and designated with that same spiral symbol. And we've seen spirals in the sky. We've seen a lot of stuff going on. And what's fascinating to me is that right now, all of these symbols, when I say all, we've only been able to decipher, and these guys the experts are using 35, thousand symbols and referencing those of 500,000. But it's pretty telling and it's pretty compelling. The human race, humans, are 6,000 years old. But I believe prior to that, there was a fallen angelic civilization, fallen angels. We can talk about that. But that all of the golden age, all of the ancient antiquity precedes the creation of Adam and Eve by 450,000 years at least. Could go back even further than that. Every single one of the finds that we have located, and this is just, the images we're showing tonight on Coast to Coast, like the aliens themselves with wings, and if you notice, they all have if you will, more of a vertical, conical-shaped head, kind of like the cone heads on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, exactly.
And the pharaohs...
A little more pronounced, I guess.
I'm sorry?
A little more pronounced, huh?
Yes, and much more pronounced. And again, what we're also seeing is more of a horizontal axis, very similar to what Steven Spielberg produced in The Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skulls.
Well, Stephen, I've always over the years seen you and have met you to be a very spiritual person. So here's the $64,000 question. Are the angels fallen ETs or are the ETs fallen angels?
Well, first of all, fallen angels, 1/3 of the angels, and they're innumerable. Somebody always wants to ask me. The ETs many of them are the fallen angels. When Zecharia Sitchin put out his different books and the word Anunnaki came into if you will, the contemporary language, okay, it literally meant those from who from heaven fell. So the word fallen and fell are similar to both the biblical account of 1/3 of the angels in heaven rebelling. And what's interesting, George, is all of the beings that we're seeing on all of the different artifacts. By the way, we've turned over, I think, close to 40 different alien species. Now, what's interesting about that is some of the oldest records in antiquity are always talking about the hybrid beings, obviously being everything from satyrs. We're seeing hybrid creatures now. People are getting freaked out because a lot of the things are coming into our dimension. I would say they're trans-dimensional beings and entities. What's fascinating is that the fallen angel motif is always associated with giants. For instance, people have always seen and used the same images of a giant king, Assyrian or even Sumerian, sitting on a throne, holding what looks like a purse and having people, normal-sized humans, standing up to its knees. You're familiar with that image?
Yeah, great image.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of the most famous images in history. Well, very few people understand that there is if you will, a dictionary and also a timing sequence called Manetho's Table of Kings that literally goes back 450,000 years before men even existed on the planet. Many of the glyphs, if you will, the images, the symbols on whether they're rocks, whether they're on everything from obsidian, believe it or not, to mother-of-pearl inlaid tiles, they tell the same story. They tell the same story over and over. But again, you have two camps. You've got the camps that the aliens created us and there is no God. You've got the camp that obviously I'm coming from, the biblical perspective that there was literally a fallen angel civilization on earth and that it rebelled against God, and the destruction of that prior golden age is why you see in the book of Genesis, in the first chapter, that the command of the living God to go out and replenish the earth, and it talks about chaos being on the face of the deep. And tohu and bohu are two words that basically mean without form and void. And that's, in essence, God judged the fallen angel civilization on earth. Now, people, obviously, that don't have a biblical perspective are going to have a real hard time with that. But yet it's fascinating because even in the Sanskrit and some of the most ancient Indian writings from the continent of India, we're seeing things that are showing up like alien treaties. And obviously Oppenheimer, that was one of the inventors of the atom bomb, quotes a famous line that he has become the destroyer of worlds. And we see evidence of vitrification, desert sand throughout different places in the world being turned to glass. But what most people don't know is that the ancient technology of the Indians, the Vimanas, and the flying machines all tie together, even to Uma, the extrasolar craft that came in. And, George, that point of contact and the orbital intersection of an area between Mars and Jupiter is literally where antiquity stated there was another planet. And the planet was called Rahab or Astra. And scientists are still trying to figure out today, I believe they know, but they can't talk about anything that would obviously offend the evolutionary biologists or the people that are in charge of keeping the false narrative going. But it's interesting that an extrasolar object would come, and again, kudos to the Harvard scientists that brought that point up, not the point I'm making, but that thing was under a intelligent control. And again, had we not been to Mexico on the expedition, which right now phase 3 is underway, and it's leading us into Latin America and South America, following the leads of all of the people that are finding the different artifacts, and Jesse G., my guy who's the director, people from all over South America, Latin America, and Mexico contact him. And I just was showing this the other day. I didn't even know this, but there's on eBay people selling from the same area. There's so many of these artifacts that it's kind of like you've got to go to the different strata or different depths of soil to find them. But everything we find is in real time, and we locate them and dig them on camera. We have them from and this is important, there's a shot on the carousel showing that we make sure that everybody understands that here's the area, here's it being filmed in real time, and some of it's laborious footage, but we have to prove to people that this is going on. And isn't it interesting that as I've talked on your show since we've known each other for decades, the Smithsonian keeps coming up. And by the way, the 31,000 artifacts that Charles Root had in the same area, the general area, I mean, we're talking about within a 50 to 100 square mile radius of where we found these artifacts. The point that's critical is that they end up in the Smithsonian and the trail ends there. So the Smithsonian is the gatekeeper. I documented in one of my films that, literally there were hundreds and totally, in totality, thousands of newspaper articles talking about so-and-so was a farmer in the, Illinois area or Cahokia Mounds or the mound-building areas of the surrounding states, and they find giant skeletons. They go to the Smithsonian, they disappear, and for the record, people are now breaking, ranks and telling what the Smithsonian really has. For instance, the Egyptian citadel in the Grand Canyon, the Smithsonian's official narrative, that didn't exist. There was nobody by the name of the famous explorer that claimed to have found the Grand Canyon citadel. There's only one problem with that. They have his entire notes and all of the artifacts that he took out of the Grand Canyon. In our documentary film, and it's on the trailer too. And so getting back to the original point, there are over at least that we've uncovered that are in the glyphs, 12 to 14, because the other two are being deciphered right now, of agreements. And when you see agreements going back, 7,000, 8,000 years between the aliens and humans, whether they're in India, whether they're in Egypt, whether they're in Angkor Wat, all over there are these secret agreements. So it's fascinating that right now, as again, the skies above are telling a very different story.
Tell us about the Egyptian and alien connections in the America's film.
Well, the trailer is on the Coast to Coast website, and I would encourage everybody. The film, and I want to make it clear, the film is right now in production. We've got literally terabytes of film that we've got acquired of our own and stuff and interviews and everything. But the thing that's interesting about the film is it's the alien Egyptian connection in the Americas, because a standard line of Powell and the Smithsonian was, these Egyptians, they never traveled all over. There's no Egyptian artifacts in the United States. Well, the place, we're filled with them. They're found all over the place. So what's critical about this is you cannot separate the Egyptians. So isn't it fascinating that, in essence, in Egyptian history, they were the gods, okay? The original, oldest dynasty in Egyptian history, they claim to be the gods that came from the stars, and that's the standard thing, whether you're dealing with, by the way, the word star in Hebrew can also mean messenger.
Monday is Christopher Columbus Day.
Columbus, and the naming of America, they claim, classic history says it was named after Amerigo Vespucci. But when you get into the ancient history of the Americas, the United States, the North American continent and the South American continent were basically named Ameruca, Ameruca. That meant the land of the plumed serpent. And interestingly enough, that's what Quetzalcoatl is all about. And we know the history of the Mayan, the Incan, and the Aztecs, but going back even further than that, we ultimately arrive, and here's the bottom line, we arrive at giants being in the Americas. We arrive at heavenly beings, always portrayed with wings. People that want to take on Columbus Day, they got to go back 9,000 years. And Cairo, and I've said this before, which is fascinating, literally means city of Mars or Mars encampment.
That's right.
And now we're finding out that Mars has water. We're finding out that there might be life on some of the Martian microscopic life. And everything we were told wasn't true about Mars is now coming to pass.
Stephen, give me your definition of the Nephilim.
Well, I think that the biblical definition, I know there are people that will argue with this, but even according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the word Nephilim is translated giants, and it means the fallen ones. And the reason they call it the fallen ones, the Nephilim, is from the Hebrew word naphal, N-A-P-H-A-L, which means, like it sounds, to fall. So the fallen ones, and George, there's two words. Nephilim are used in both before the flood in Genesis chapter 6 and after the flood in Numbers 13:33. The famous passage about the Israelite spies going into the land of Canaan and seeing people that were so tall that the people reporting it said that we were as grasshoppers in their sight. So it means the fallen ones, and it also is interesting that after that they're called the Rephaim. And two of the most famous people in the world that were obviously something happened to them, and sometimes the word Gibborim is also used. That means a mighty one, a mighty man, and it specifically applies to Nimrod. All of the mythology, all of it, goes back to the gods. And whether it's the Greek gods, whatever pantheon that they believed in, the Greeks, the Titans, and the Olympians. But there was always hanky-panky. For instance, they just found a new statue of Hercules, and Hercules was the
2,000 years old or something like that.
Yeah, and Hercules was the offspring of Zeus. So when you're asking me what's the best definition, in my opinion, it is the fallen ones, okay? In my way of understanding, I've written about this, and there are people that disagree, but they call the giants. The giants are Nephilim. The fallen ones are those who fathered the Nephilim, are the ones who fell from heaven, because it's interesting, both before the flood and the Genesis 6 says there were giants in those days and after those days, meaning after the flood. Nephilim are not the giants. The fallen angels can take on the stature. How's that for being tactful? The stature of humans. And so, in essence, we have the testimony of the ancient ones talking about the gods appearing as normal men. The Apostle Paul said, Satan himself can manifest himself as an angel of light.
Well, who died in the flood of Noah?
Pardon?
Who died in the flood of Noah?
The flood of Noah, everybody except Noah and his immediate family. And it says in the Bible that Noah was the only one left who was perfect in his generations. So, again, the word Nephilim, though, is translated giants, and I believe that the amount of evidence is only in two places for the word Nephilim. Now, this is interesting. The word Rephaim talks about the dead. or those who are the dead ones, the dead men walking, so to speak, or the fallen angels. So, again, we're talking about the fallen mighty men.
Stephen, we have 40 seconds left. Tell folks where they can get more information on what you do.
Well, I would encourage them to go to gen6.com, GENSIX.com, and it's really important because there's so much information there. Or, George, just go to your front page, and there's a blue hot link or hyperlink there that says Related Online Conference. And I think I would encourage everybody, before they pass judgment on what is this crazy stuff he's talking about, to watch our trailer, The Egyptian Alien Connection. George, thank you for having me on tonight, and God bless you, and thanks for all the years we've been together.
Many more to come, Stephen. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.